Hey, this is Zach Log the Great, and I am here tonight with my friend Nate.
Hello.
And with Travis.
Hi.
And we are getting together tonight to talk about C.S. Lewis's poem, Science Fiction Cradlesong, which I believe Nate volunteered to read for us in just a moment. Before we get to that, I did want to remind everyone watching, if you like my work, if you want to help me out, support what I do, keep it going, please go to subscribestar.com/Zachlog-the-great. Link will be in the show description, but please go to that and support and consider signing up for a monthly donation. And thank you to Joseph L., my newest subscriber. I appreciate your support, and I hope you continue to find my work interesting. So, having said that, let me get the poem up here for everyone to look at, and Nate can read it for us. All right, and there we go.
We're good?
Yep.
All right. Science Fiction Cradlesong by C.S. Lewis. By and by, man will try to get out into the sky, sailing far beyond the air, from down and here to up and there. Stars and sky, sky and stars, make us feel prison bars. Now suppose it done, and now we ride, closed in steel up there, outside. Through our portholes see the vast heavenscape go rushing past. Shall we? All that meets the eye is sky and stars, stars and sky. Points of light, with black between, hang like a painted scene, motionless no nearer there than on earth. Everywhere, equidistant from our ship, heaven has given us the slip. Hush, be still. Outer space is a concept, not a place. Try no more where we are, never can be sky or star. From prison, in a prison we fly, there's no way into the sky.
All right. Well, thank you, Nate. And Travis, you have not been with us for a while. Would you like to get started? What's your first thoughts about this poem?
I guess I find the juxtaposition of stars and sky and prison bars. I think it is interesting. It's a very interesting concept that he's talking about, and I guess my thought was, he's talking about space, but in many ways, any of man's endeavors sort of work the same way, I think, where you kind of leap into them and you go out there to find something or build something or grow something. But once you're there, you find that the elements of that endeavor create their own sort of prison at the same time, or they can.
Yeah, and it's it's partly the idea, and like you said, he's directly talking about going into outer space exploration, but it does have these more metaphorical applications of striving for something bigger, striving for something greater, trying to capture that dream, and then you get there and you find out that even if you achieve it, you find out you pretty much you have that moment, you have maybe a day or two, but then you find out that it's pretty much just life still. And
well, I think you find out that you're small. I think like the idea of space, and he's saying, even though you left Earth and you're out there, you're equidistant from stars, you know, and space. Still, it's kind of like you figure out how small you are once you get out there.
Yeah, yeah. It's and it's also that, like, you know, where we are never can be sky or star, you know, and it's kind of the old thing, wherever you go, there you are. And all of the problems that are inside of you are going to go with you no matter what, you know, what you manage to achieve. You can't escape yourself from prison.
And that's kind of what I got out of it, was that, you know, beyond having a really interesting take on the phrase "the sky's the limit," in this case, he kind of implies that it is a hard limit. But it was that, you know, all this wishing and wanting, in the end, you know, so what? Even if you get what you wish for, like you said, it doesn't change really much of anything. You know, there's all the people that think, well, if I had this, I would be happy. Or if I had that, all my problems would go away. No, man, the star map doesn't change, all right? All that does is strip away your illusions and actually can make things harder on you, because then you have to acknowledge that your demons are your own. And now you don't have a reason to distract yourself from them. You're just kind of there with yourself. And there's an Adventure Time episode where they're like talking about, let's watch a scary movie or something. It's like, one of the guys says, like, yeah, we could watch a scary movie, or we could go to bed early and be alone with our thoughts. And everybody was like, that's too scary. I was like, man, Pop's keeping it too real. All right. But, and that's kind of what I got out of it, was that, you know, you set all these goals, like, if I can just see those mountains, you know, then you go to the mountains and you look beyond them, and what do you see? Mountains.
Well, and then beyond that, you may see ocean beyond that, but then once you get in the ocean, what do you see? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the end, you know, it's noble to strive for a dream and to try and attain things, but like we talked about last week, you can't define yourself in that, because once you've achieved it, if you define yourself in the pursuit, and now the pursuit is over, who are you? And honestly, I was kind of struck by this several years ago, because, you know, when I was a young man, I said, I want to be a husband and a father. You know, I want to marry a beautiful girl, have some adorable children, and provide for them. And I realized, beautiful girl, check. Adorable children, check. Providing for them, check. What now? What do I want to do? You know, what new forces what new targets can I find to motivate myself? Because frankly, I've got all the things I wished for.
Well, I will say, you know, when you have kids, there's a pretty continual development and a continual you know, goal right there, because just keeping up with them and, you know, trying to be the person they need you to be, that's a big charge right there, and it doesn't stop. It doesn't. That's really
true, but you kind of get a stride of it, you know.
Well,
it's like doing a long trail ride. You know, you're like, all right, you know, I got to kind of get to grips with this, and then but once you're in it, you can just kind of, you know, just kind of rock with the rhythm and keep rolling, and, you know, keep moving on along, and you get used to it. You know, it's like, okay, I understand this process. I'm doing the best I can. There'll be some thorny bits, but it's okay.
And sudden, completely unexpected turns in the path. I think if you throw that in, you have a good bit of it. Occasional, sudden, completely unexpected turns, or drops. But one thing, strictly about the text, about the poem, about the wording of the poem itself, I found pretty interesting. The first stanza, stars and sky, sky and stars. There's a really neat verbal trick he does there, because, and I remember in college, one of my professors talking about this. There's a pattern in English words. There's all kinds of words like flip-flops, chit-chat. What are some others?
Yeah, I read about this. I read about this rule not too long ago. I was like, oh my god, everything does follow this.
Yeah, right. And it goes from the high pitched, or from the kind of closed mouth to the open mouth to the lower pitch, lower sounding one. And that's the pattern we expect. We're used to that. And in that line, and it actually made it kind of difficult to memorize this one for a little while. I kept on wanting to turn it around. In that line, it's stars and sky, sky and stars, and it starts out backwards. And like, there's this weird sense of uneasiness about inverting that pattern, which goes very well with what he's talking about in the poem. And that's a pretty neat trick, just verbally.
Yeah, I like the tone of it. Yeah, go ahead, Travis.
I was just going to say, well, and in the second stanza, he does flip it. So in the first stanza, it's stars and sky, sky and stars. And then in the second stanza, it's is sky and stars, stars and sky. So he
because in that stanza, that's where people he has like, oh, we did it, we won, and then it's supposed to be this satisfying feeling before he has that kind of like, wait, did we actually win? And so by switching it up there, that's actually another use of that same pattern. But
what I was going to say is that I like kind of the whole, like the way the stars and sky and stars, the way it works with the poem. Yeah, it kind of works with the tone. It gives it this sort of like harumphing tone of like stars and sky. Everybody's talking about the doggone stars. You get to the stars and you get out past the sky, and what do you got? Nothing.
Well,
there's not even anything there to be a place. It's just an idea that, the idea is that we're here, but there's nothing here but us. And we took our live on the earth you were born to. Damn it.
Well, I don't quite get that tone, but I kind of understand where you're coming from, because I mean, C.S. Lewis was a big science fiction fan himself, and he wrote 3 science fiction stories. It's Out of the Silent Planet, and Paralandra, and That Hideous Strength, which go together, which are a trilogy, and they're all really good stories. I think Paralandra is my favorite, and the third one takes a distinct change in tone, but and he was a science fiction fan himself, so he didn't hate this idea of going out and conquering the stars, but at the same time, we started off saying, whatever is wrong with inside us, we're going to bring that with us to deal with that out there. And so
I didn't actually do any research on when this was written. What was the time frame this was being written?
I do not have, I have his poems in a collection a bunch of them all together. So, and I don't think they have a date on them. So I don't know off the top of my head. He did, C.S. Lewis died in 1963. So that was, before, that would be before the moon landing. If it happened, sorry, I'm mostly joking. A particular person I'm a fan of is running with is very big on the moon landing never happened as one of his things right now. I neither agree nor disagree with him on that. I am happy to embrace skepticism. In fact, I have a whole video about, you know, why how little we actually know. Most of what we know because other people told us. So, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to distract. But anyway.
Well, but that's actually somewhat interesting, you know, because as humans, that's often the reason we will go somewhere, is because someone tells us. You know, either they'll tell us, like, the moon, I was there and it's great, you should go, or they will say, well, the moon's there, but no one's ever been there, and somebody will say, well, then I'm going to go there. You know, it's like, it's kind of like either way, it kind of, people look for meaning in going somewhere,
Exploring and finding something new. But then, you know, like we said, you go somewhere, you find something new, and there is something new, but there's also still you. And you know, you've got to deal with you being there. There's someone I know.
I guess that's what I like about like things like, you know, westerns and like sort of frontier fiction, is that, you know, you end up with these people. It's really fun to like see the ones about, like, you know, the Easterner, you know, the tenderfoot getting out there in the wilderness and having to learn how to live, you know, because they have to face up to who they are, and they have to decide that, hey, all right, I got to give up some of these precious notions of mine that have turned out to be roughly shattered on the rocks of this country. And, you know, it's always fun to, you know, read stories about people with that kind of development, that it's like, hey, I realize now the flaws that I brought with me that were kind of papered over by, you know, the mass of people around me. I could either, you know, say, well, I'm no worse than anybody else, this is okay. But then when I get out somewhere where it's just me, it suddenly becomes a matter of survival. Like, yeah, okay, hang on to this attitude will ruin me, if not kill me. And so it said, you know, the whole sort of like isolationist thing, like, or isolated, I guess, not isolationist. Like I said, the whole sort of like, you know, this idea of this isolated person coming to grips with their true nature and then improving or failing to, is just always a story that has appealed to me.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, those stories, I'm specifically, you know, thinking of Westward. You know, the people would go west and they lived in civilization and they're kind of prim and proper and have their white picket fence. But when they get out west, you know, they're faced with brutality. They're faced with the viciousness of having to kill animals, you know, to survive. And so in some ways, it's like finding themselves in that way. They're becoming more primitive, you know, and then that question of, are we becoming closer to our humanity whenever we are in a more primitive, bare, sparse, need to survive situation versus living in the city with your needs met and someone else butchering things for you? I don't know. It's an interesting.
Yeah, and, you know, like I said, I find that the idea of the humanities, right, you know, art and all that, they only really flourish in the cities, but the best people, to my mind anyway, I may be a little biased on this count, but I feel like the best people are found in the countryside. You know, well, people out there keeping it rural tend to, you know, they go ahead and, you know, they'll welcome you and they'll help you, they'll do whatever, whereas people in the city can't, literally, like, psychologically can't be bothered to notice you because there's just too many.
So there's two things there. One, for people, as usual, we're on an odd sidetrack here, but that's not a deal.
I feel like that's where good writing takes you.
It's not really a sidetrack, though, because it's all the frontier.
It is exploration.
Yeah,
it is exploration. So for people who are fans of Western novels or Western movies, it's not really a as far as I know, it's not really a terribly lively genre these days. But I do know of at least one author who is publishing Western novels. And so if you're interested in new Western novels coming out, there's a set of books by Peter Grant. The first one is Brings the Lightning. And I believe, let me take a look here. Oh, really? Oh, wow. The Amazon page is gone. Let me see if I can find it somewhere else. Oh, okay, there it is. There it is. Good. Oh, I was a little worried for a moment. Okay. The book is Brings the Lightning by Peter Grant, and it's available for $12 hardback or $15. That's weird. 12. Let's see. All formats. $12 hardback, $15 paperback, which that doesn't make much sense.
All right.
That's what it's showing.
Give me a nice man whopper then. That's all right.
That's what it's showing on Amazon. But it's by Peter Grant, Brings the Lightning. So if you want to get some new Western novels, I haven't read it, but I am told it also includes quite a bit for gun aficionados. If you like detailed descriptions of the firearms and their workings. I think I heard that. Anyway, and the other thing.
Don't forget Cormac McCarthy as a modern Western writer.
I did not know about that. But the other thing you were saying, the humanities do not tend to flourish in these kind of environments, and that reminds me of actually, I think the first full Western novel I read was loaned to me by Travis. It's by Louis L'Amour, and it was Riley's Luck. And
that's a good one.
Yeah, it is.
I still remember the scene where this guy is raising an orphan. He's taking care of him, and he's in a tavern in some Western town, and he thinks the kid should have a full education, so he's telling him about poetry, and some big.
I remember that scene.
And some big idiotic lug comes up to him and says something about poetry is sissy stuff, and you should talk about something real, something that matters. And the main character calmly pulls out his knife, and before the guy knows what's happening, he knifes the guy's hand to the table and proceeds to read to him the entirety of Alfred Lord Tennyson's Ulysses before he lets him go. Which that scene has stuck with me.
That was a great scene. I think later in that book they make the War and Peace joke. Or something like it was like a big heavy book, and a guy busts into his house, kicks up the doors, takes a few shots at him. He ends up the kid ends up diving out the window and all that, and he's trying to figure out. He's like, that guy had me dead to rights. What happened? And he comes back in and shoots the guy dead. And later on, he goes back in the room, picks up the book, and the guy's bullets had struck this big heavy book he was reading, and they couldn't penetrate. And he's like, to be honest, I never could make it through that book either. If you want to read some older Westerns, L'Amour is fantastic.
Yeah, he is.
So, back to C.S. Lewis, perhaps. I
would love to have read L'Amour doing science fiction. I'm just so mad. It's so far out of his wheelhouse. It would have been amazing.
Well, he didn't. He did do a somewhat. He did a Western sort of science fiction. He wrote a book about the Anasazi and like going through a
Yeah.
time portal back into another time.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I think I own that book and I hate it. That's like the one book of his that I'm like, this right here is kind of crap. It was like, oh man, it's probably on my shelf right here behind me. Actually, if I'll look for it enough. But yeah, I was like, no, I'm not feeling that one.
So to get back to C.S. Lewis, one thing about this poem I think is pretty well done. Is that like if you think about what would happen if we went out into space, you look around and you're in a spaceship, you go to a porthole, or in science fiction today they have these viewing screens, which for some reason they also insist on making actual windows a lot of the time, which is stupid. If you're going to have a viewing if you're going to have a viewing screen, why also make it an actual window that is a point of vulnerability on your bridge where your captain... Anyway.
Well, I mean, they're not going to be made out of glass, man. That's going to be transparent aluminum. That's probably stronger than the rest of the hull if it comes down to actual, like, physical, material science.
Right. Nothing's that strong on those things. It's pretty thin.
Well, I mean, when it gets hit by, massive explosions in space, which also probably shouldn't happen, but anyway.
Well, I mean, if you're hitting with explosive that has oxidizers, there'll be a brief fireball. But anyway, we're skewing badly. Yeah, what you're trying to say, though, is that your star, like I said, the outlook, like the constellations don't change. Like, you have to move on scales that boggle the mind. Like, if you go out past the edge of Jupiter, your constellations are going to be mostly the same.
Well,
you might notice a small shift, but it's not going to be enough because like I said, the scale involved is literally mind numbing. It's like, okay, in the many years between Pluto being discovered, classified as a planet, declassified from planet status, and then the hue and cry being raised to get it reclassified as a planet, it has not gone around the sun once. It's still like, well, okay, those uppity little monkeys down there are still talking about whether they're on a planet or not. Charon, come on, man, what do you think about this? And Charon's just like, harumph.
Yeah,
sky, stars in the sky.
Pluto's year is like 600 Earth years or something like that, I think. I could have that wrong. Anyway, but the other thing is, it's not.
Then it goes inside Uranus sometimes.
Yes, correct. But anyway, but it's also not just that the constellations are the same, but like, we look up at the night sky and we see the stars and we say, I want to go there and I want to see all these new worlds. And you go out in a spaceship and you're traveling and you look outside and it's going to look almost exactly the same as the night sky. You haven't, like, nothing's changed. And you're not even out there because, like you said, you're still in a prison. You're in this little metal box out there, but you're not out. You can't be out there because if you are out there, you're dead.
Yep.
And
what's interesting is that not only are you now more constrained than you would have been before, you're out of your element, you're in a place that will eventually destroy you if you stay there long enough. You can't even see as much of the sky as you could before. I mean, before you had the whole grand sweep, I mean, if you're here, the part of the country we're in, you get about 180 degrees of sky. Because things are just flat. Great, by the way, can't stand mountains. But
I miss it.
It's just flat, man. And so it's like, all right, you can see an amazing amount of sky. It's like, holy cow, it's a lot. If you're in your spaceship out there among the stars, you can see your little porthole view. You might get a dozen stars in that, whereas before you could see all the thousands. And again, it's that idea that attaining the dream actually is sometimes, it can sometimes lead you to have less than when you started.
Well, that's a little bit like I don't know if you've heard or read these stories. Like people who win the lottery, like
yeah, and ruins their life.
It just blasts their. Well, okay, and there's a couple parts of that. One thing, and I'm sorry if some people take this the wrong way, but by definition, people who win the lottery are people who play the lottery, and people who play the lottery are people who are bad with money in the first place. And so, you know, like if you hand a lot of money to someone who understands how money works and what to do and how it affects them, it's not that big a deal. If you hand a lot of money to someone who fundamentally doesn't understand money, is not responsible, which, like I said, by definition, people who play the lottery aren't, and then they're just going to wreck themselves. So, but like I was saying,
my mama used to say, my mama says, poor folks got poor ways. And it ain't just to say that, these are bad people. It's just that there's a reason that they tend to stay poor. And I mean, yeah, sometimes there's overarching conditions that affect it, but in the end, it's usually mismanagement. It's like we'd rather have these short-term things than to go ahead and hold on and invest in the long term. And so you get stuck in this cycle of short-term things, and you go, I don't have money to do the long-term thing. Well, you do. You just got to, spend it properly.
There are both circumstantial and personal behavioral causes for lack of financial success, and there's both. But
for me, I spend too much money on these nice plaid robes.
Hey, I mean, they are classy. I mean, you gotta give credit where it's due. But what I was saying a minute ago, where we started, it is really, again, more credit to C.S. Lewis. It is really fascinating how he, like, on both the very literal and metaphorical level, he makes this work, and how that literal level is I mean, even now, like, this has to be this is over 50 years old, but I haven't heard, if not anyone else, very few people, like, give this kind of perspective on actual space travel, on, like, we get out there and what are we going to see? We're going to see exactly what we see in the night sky here. And it's, yeah.
I think mechanically what I like about it the most, just in its execution, is it's easy to read. Come here and tell you, man, that sonnet we talked about last week was a freaking bear to read. I was like, ah.
Well, okay, now, to be fair, John Milton was also writing about 300 years ago, whereas I don't know the dates off the top of my head, but it's roughly that. And C.S. Lewis is writing, 50 to 75 years ago. So there's more of a gap in how we use language from us to Milton.
That's true. Still, God, that day I was like, man, this flows like chunky peanut butter.
It's still one of the ones that can really, like, the ending really punches me, though.
No, the Messenger is amazing, but all right, we're traveling into the past.
We've got to get back to the future, Marty!
So I'll bring us back with the last, 4 lines. Where we are never can be sky or star. From prison in a prison we fly. There's no way into the sky. And I just think that's, like you talked about the past. Like, a lot of times, I mean, I go to a therapist and we talk about the fantasies, that we live in. Like, we create these fantasies for the future or the past, and we kind of live there in our minds and kind of miss the present in some ways. And just how much, he's talking, about ships, but in the end, it really comes down to like these human bodies are prisons in a sense. No matter where we go, we're still human and we still have our human frailty, and yeah, like that never goes away no matter where we go or what endeavors we pursue.
That reminds me of a point I wanted to bring up earlier. There's someone I know, someone I've worked with, and I remember I wasn't in this conversation myself, but I remember someone said, I worked with him, and then didn't see him for a couple of years, and then ran into him later. And someone else said, "Oh yeah, I was talking to him, and he's he went to this city out on the West Coast, and then he went to this other city, and he talked about all the people here are all assholes, and all the people over here are all assholes." And he complains about the people here in our area, and I don't know whether I said it or the person I was talking to said it, but it's there's one common factor in all of these places that you're talking about. Do you know what that common factor is? It's you. Have you ever considered that maybe it's not that everyone everywhere are horrible, are horrible people that don't meet your expectations? Maybe the problem is you. And it's yeah.
Thanks for telling that story about me, Sean. I really appreciate it. Jeez. No,
I don't remember hearing you talk like
that. No, what I was thinking most while I was reading this, and kind of in the couple of minutes after, where my brain's sort of chewing it up and going, all right, let's get the marrow here, was that the whole thing, it really was summed up for me that heaven has given us the slip. And the idea is that, no matter how high you build your tower there in Babylon, no matter how far you sail your ship from Athens, no matter how high you fly from Canaveral, you can't make it to heaven on your own. All right. And no amount of work will ever bring you beyond the realm that you inhabit. And that, this whole thing, the body is our prison, all that it is, we are spirits. We exist on two planes at once. Our spirit knows where it comes from, and really wants to go back.
Well,
and so we end up, searching for things and ways to reach eternity and to get as close as we can. But then we find out that just like those stars that we see out the porthole of our little ship, eternity, no matter how high we go, no matter how much we attain, is still just as far away.
There's one.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say one minor point about that, and I don't think you meant this. It's something I hear, and I think it's easy for people to take it the wrong way, because one thing about Christianity, and one thing that I think is very important about Christianity. In fact, now that I think about this, I did this and talked about this in my Christmas video, is that my last Christmas video, is that Christianity says that we are spirits and we are bodies, and we are both, and they are both real and they both matter, and that not it's I think a lot of people, and even a lot of Christians, want to go to this, we're actually these pure spirit beings. No, that's not.
No, yeah. The spirit is the life inside of us. It's the breath of God that animates this dirt. All right. like I said, and that is one of the parts of us, that is going to persist once the body is dead. And so, when I talk about we're spirits, I never say anything about purity. And it says what we are.
But also
the thing is that, like I said, the deal being that, we're trapped here with this limited and flawed sort of existence, trapped within the flow of time. And, it's like there's a sense in all of us that there's something bigger out there waiting. We always want to try and find it. And so we set up these fantasies of escape, that, we're all-powerful wizards, or we're super scientists, star explorer, spaceship captains with green-skinned alien babes hanging off of, both arms and our neck. And just, we set up these things to make, aggrandize ourselves because we want to be more than a flawed vessel, trapped in an unrelenting stream. We want to be the masters of it, but we never will be. And so somehow we try to find a way to transcend. And so it leads a lot of people into these, addictions and fantasies and all this sort of thing. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of fantasy every now and then, because it's a lot of fun. It can help to sort of, give you a break from the oppressive reality, and you can kind of be like, hey, all right, cool. I want to think of something just enjoyable for a minute, that makes me happy. Great, go for it. But when it becomes your whole life, you have a problem where you can't bear to leave the fantasy to face reality. And so finding the balance there can be hard. And so that's where I'm going to go ahead and keep pounding my drum, because I think I make this point like every 2 out of 3 videos, is that you got to find your root in God. And so, that way you can connect to the greater reality. You can, by serving his transcendent purpose, your existence transcends. You become, part of a much larger ongoing force. And you don't so much need to build your high tower or fly your fast ship. You can reach the metaphorical stars in this case, from wherever you're at, doing whatever you do.
So, I'm sorry, I have to. This is just kind of funny. You reminded me of this a moment ago. You were talking about green skin space babes, and I saw this one a while ago, and it's just too fun not to share. So I'm going to put this up here for a moment. I'm aware that this is a distraction from your point. I'm sorry.
We had a James Bond themed Christmas party at my squadron once. My wife was like 8.5 months pregnant, so she wanted to be a Bond girl. And so she kind of was holding a little sign that said, it's like, 8 months after Goldeneye.
I'm actually going to have to read those books sometime. The books that those were based on, because Ian Fleming actually, unless I'm remembering correctly, Ian Fleming actually knew something about real espionage, like during World War II, and like obviously the Bond movies have gone kind of away from that a little bit, just a tiny bit different.
A fraction.
But I am kind of curious about the source material. That actually, reminds me, like I was saying when we had Jeffro Johnson on, of how very surprised I was how much I liked the Tarzan books, especially having just seen basically these 5th generation copies, and then you go to the original and you're like, wow, this is a lot better than I was expecting. So I'm going to have to read the.
I am running out of time here.
Okay.
Phone just went into blackout mode, so I've got probably like 4 minutes left.
Okay. Well, Nate, did you have? I think we've had a pretty good talk on this one. Nate, did you have any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. By all means, reach for the stars, but understand that you will never have them in your hand. But work hard to make a difference. Find God, do His work, and you will eventually be doing the work of one who is even beyond the stars. And that's my thought.
Nate, sorry. Did you have any last thoughts
Travis?
about this one?
You mean Travis?
Ah!
That's all right. I don't know. I've just been sort of sitting with, and I haven't figured out exactly what its full depth is, but I just think it's interesting that he calls it a cradle song. So that it's like a nursery rhyme. It's like it's something for children, and we sing a lot of nursery rhyme. Go ahead.
Well, it's also the idea that, like, if you look at the the story, the kind of overall narrative, especially in early 20th century science fiction, there's this idea that humanity on Earth is humanity in its infancy, and we will not end, like, by going out to the stars. That's how we're going to reach that's how we're going to grow up and achieve our full potential. And so I think, there's other ways to look at it. I don't know, but I think that's how I read it.
It's actually a pretty interesting point.
Okay. Well, then thank you both for joining me tonight, and I hope to talk to you guys again soon. And God be with you.
Also with you.
All right. Good night.